Director of Social Services for the town of Enfield. The Department of Social Services is honored to sponsor this presentation tonight with the Network Against Domestic Abuse. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and tonight we gather together to celebrate the strength and courage of victims of domestic violence. Annalisa from the network will introduce tonight's guests.
Hi everyone, I'm Annalisa from the network, and thank you everyone for coming tonight. Tonight we have a presentation on domestic violence for our National Domestic Violence Awareness Month, which is October. We have, first of all, a bunch of refreshments and information about our agency on the side for anybody to pick up some to take home, and one of our speakers has a book available. How we're going to start tonight is with a 10-year-old violinist from Assumption School in Manchester, Connecticut. She reached out to us wanting to give a gift to any victims or survivors that might be present of her music. It was an idea that she had and was nice enough to offer to us, so we're going to have her come up and play a couple songs as her gift, and then we're going to have a couple speakers after. Thank you, Joanna, for those beautiful songs. Now we're going to have a couple speakers come up tonight and talk a little bit more about their experience with domestic violence to make people more familiar. Some basic things to know about domestic violence to start with is that from what we know, it's about somebody trying to get power and control over another person in the relationship. So a lot of the warning signs that you'll be hearing about tonight are different ways that one person was trying to get power and control over another. Our speakers are going to talk a lot about the warning signs, but we also want to mention that domestic violence can happen to anybody. It can happen to males or females, to any socioeconomic status. Anybody could really be a victim. So raising awareness is important. If anybody here listening or anybody at home listening could just take in some of what was learned from the speakers, that maybe you can help a friend or help somebody else that you know if you're not going through it yourself, or maybe just to raise awareness for things you might want to look out for in your relationships to make sure that they are healthy. Again, we do have more information available at the end, but we're first going to have our first speaker come up, and then at the end when she's done, there will be an opportunity to ask any questions, to maybe get more familiar with what happened or how you can be aware, or just to learn more information based on what she said. So if Luz Casanova could come up and start.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here today. My name is Lucilina Casanova, and just to give you a little bit of background on what I do today, I'm a technical consultant by day, and by evening I do a lot of public speaking regarding victims of domestic abuse. I also am a coach and a trainer with the John Maxwell Corporation, so I also do a lot of speaking with children on building self-esteem and self-confidence. So I wanted to start off because I do enjoy talking about this topic because I feel that a lot of people don't want to hear about domestic abuse. Whenever I mentioned that I was in an abusive relationship or I was once a victim, people will look at me and say, "You don't look like one." And my question back to them is, how does a victim look? So just by hearing that, you know we're being stereotyped. You have to look a certain way in order for people to know that or say you are a victim. I am no longer a victim. I refuse to label myself as a victim. I call this a war. America is in a war, and I'm not referring to the war in Iraq and the Middle East. The war I'm referring to is right here in our backyard. And that war is basically taking our people hostage by victimizing them, abusing them, and basically having people feel they have no outlet, they have no life. That is called domestic abuse. And that war is very challenging because it's held behind closed doors. So no one wants to get involved today. Neighbors, the community. And what happens, it keeps growing. Now the children are spilling this into our school environment, where now the children are becoming abusive. They're labeled now as bullies. But if you look at the underlining of what a bully is, it's basically someone that wants control over someone else. So we have to really take a step back and realize that our home environment is what's cultivating this type of behavior. So that brings me to the point where I would like to talk about my background. I was born and raised in an environment that was toxic. Both my parents were abusive. My father was abusive towards my mother, and then my mother was abusive towards us because she had no outlet. And that's usually when someone is being victimized, that's exactly what they do. They take it out on someone who's innocent or someone who doesn't know how to fight back. And that's the environment for children. Children have no way of fighting back. They think it's normal. So in my environment, my dad was very abusive mentally, emotionally, physically towards my mom, and I saw it as being normal. I didn't know any better. And seeing that my mother was tolerating it, I felt me as a woman, as a child, female, that's my demise. That's what I'm going to go through. And in the interim, my mother took it out on us. So my mother was sort of a bully as well. We never did anything good in her eyes. And whenever my father would take it out on her, when he wasn't around, she would take it out on us. So once my two brothers left to the military, I was left alone to deal with her. And unfortunately, she never had the ability to really understand that she didn't deserve it. She felt, I'm his wife, we've been married for so long, my culture is you stay with the man until death do us part. And that's exactly what they did. My father passed before my mother, and to the last dying breath, she said, you know, that was my role in this life. She misunderstood the purpose that she was here. We're not here to be abused by anyone else. We're given a life that is us to grow and live our purpose. We all have a purpose in this life. It's up to us to find it. Also, when you're in an abusive relationship, sometimes you don't realize that you are because you're subjected to it from childhood. So this is what happened. I'm in this environment, toxic environment with my parents. I ended up marrying an abuser. He had all the signs like my father. He was very jealous, insecure, self-centered, very egotistic. And for me, that was romantic. The fact that he would constantly be calling me when we were dating. He would call me at least 20 times a day just to find out where I was. And if I wouldn't answer the phone, and remember back then, there were no cell phones. So that means I would have to be home when he would call. And if he would call and I wasn't available, he would literally drive from New York to New Jersey to try to find me. If that's not a red flag, then what is? Okay, but back then, I didn't know what it was a red flag. For me, it was, oh, he loves me so much that he's going out of his way just to come see me. So this is where young folks look at this type of behavior as romantic, when they're not really looking at the person is trying to control you. So we ended up getting married, and at the beginning, it was more verbally abusive. I was stupid, I was a biatch, I don't want to say, but you get that. all the names that I would literally hear from my mom. So it was like repeating it again. So I, after a while, believed it, and it didn't bother me. So for the beginning of our relationship, it was kind of difficult because I became a mom very early on, and I had to rely on him for everything because I had no skill sets. So he was the breadwinner, which didn't make enough bread for everybody to eat. So I found myself, I had to go out and find a job. Every job I would get, he would sabotage. Either he would end up showing up at the office at random hours, or he would call me 10 times a day while I'm at work. And after a while, they got tired of it. And they're like, we don't need that. You're here to work, not to be answering the phones. Finally, I decided to take a job out of state. I lived in New Jersey, and I went to New York, and I was working in New York. I believe that everyone should have a mentor in their life, or be open to someone giving you a compliment. When you're in an abusive relationship, anything nice someone has to say, you always doubt, because all you're used to hearing is the negative stuff. And if you don't know yourself, you can't take it as a compliment. You'll take it as they're flirting with you. So here I had this amazing boss that saw my talent and said, you know, you have a lot to offer. Why are you dealing with what you're dealing with? I had no answer for him because I was still feeling like, really, you're serious? Me? Smart? No way. So after a while, my ex-husband, from the verbal, became physical. Now he became slightly just shoving me here and there. Oh, I'm sorry. One time going to work, he actually beat me with a brush over my head, saying that I was trying to look pretty for my boss. Then another time we got into a confrontation and he bit me in the face. And it was because he didn't want anybody to look at me. So now it's getting a little ridiculous. Now I'm realizing this is not normal. So I was trying to leave several times. I attempted to leave him. And this is the pattern with women, that they leave a relationship. They don't plan their leave. And I always suggest to women, when you're going to leave an abuser, you need to plan what you're going to do, because you're going to end up coming back, just like a rubber band. Stretch, you come back. Why? Because you don't have the ability to stand on your own 2 feet. You have lost your sense of self. When you're with an abuser, you don't know who you are, because you're living by the rules of someone else. That is, he's running your life. So you're not taking the time to figure out, who am I? So every time I would leave the relationship, I would find myself missing him, wanting to go back, or financially strapped. I didn't have enough money to really support the family. But I gotta say, every time I left, I learned something new. So when I went back, I would prepare for my next leave, which was ridiculous. Today I tell whoever I speak to, forget the rubber band effect. Just plan it right the first time and just leave. You're wasting your life. I wasted 11 years of my life with this man, with the back and forth. Finally, it took the last event, which was he tried to strangle me. At that point, I realized this man really wants to kill me. So I said, I'm going to leave for the sake of the children, not for me. And this is where a lot of women go wrong, especially my mom will always say, I don't want my children to grow up without their father. So I'm staying for the sake of the children. It kills me to hear those words, because you're killing your children slowly. I remember going to school and not being at ease, thinking something's going to happen to my mom at home. Okay, this is what happened with children. We don't see them. I couldn't verbalize what I was feeling. I didn't understand it. But when I was at school, teachers would notice, you know, she's not attentive today. What's going on? But I would tell my mom, I would beg my mom, leave him. And she would say, I don't want you to be without a father. I'm like, but he's not going to die. But she couldn't ration out. So the reason behind that is the individual is the one that's afraid to leave, and they're using the children as a crutch. So now for the sake of the children, they feel, I don't want to leave, when it's them that's afraid to leave. My mother actually devoted her entire life to my father, 45 years, never learned about herself, never learned how to drive, never learned to take care of her finances, that when he passed, she was totally lost without him. Even though the life that he gave her was a torturous life, she missed him because she never took the time to get to know herself. When you get to know yourself, you love yourself. You'll love yourself enough to set boundaries, to say, you know what, that behavior is unacceptable. Today, I see certain patterns, I run the other way. The guy doesn't have to even give me a second date. I notice it, I'm out of here. You might say you're prejudging too early, but I can tell. I'm at a point in my life, I know what I want. And finally, I can say, I love me. And that's what we all have to come to. Love yourself. Understand yourself. So when I was in this environment, this marriage, my mother was always on his side. I was always the wrong. I was always in the wrong. So finally, when I had all my ducks in order, now I was going to take this adventure where I was going to leave the state. I wanted to go far away, that rubber band will break and I won't go back. So I told my mom, I'm going to move to Massachusetts. I lived in New Jersey. Well, she went behind my back with my ex-husband to court to fight for custody for my children. That was a blow. At that point, I thought I was going to die. I couldn't see myself without my children. I felt my children were my strength for me to leave. And now I'm going to leave them behind because my mother is going to go to court with my abuser. What is the judge going to think? She might not be a good mother when her own mother is here. So that played in my head over and over and over. So what did I do? I tried the easy way out. I tried to commit suicide. That's when I knew you have to change your ways. You have to have a plan. When I was in the hospital in intensive care, I was in and out of consciousness. That was the beginning of the end. I was disappointed when I woke up and realized, damn, I'm still here? What the heck? And I knew the consequences would probably get worse, because now if I go before a judge, they're going to say, you're unstable. You try to commit suicide. So I had that fighting in me. In the meantime, I had if this is a secret, you will have to read my book to see what happened. But the moment I was in the hospital, it changed my life forever. Forever. That when this event happened at the hospital, I walked out of there feeling, I'm going to own the world. This world is mine. And I relocated here 18 years ago, had no job, no friends, no family, no one. I would go on daily trips with my kids, and we would play, let's get lost and see how we get home. And then I had to change the little game because they would cry. I'm like, oh, that's not the point. We're supposed to make it fun. But when they would see me get lost, they were like, no, this is not fun, Mom. Okay, all right, how about if I throw in McDonald's? If you find a way back home, you'll get McDonald's to it. Then they were both alert. Yeah, Ma, here, there. And they saw what I was doing. I was creating a new life for them. And I'll tell you, it was very difficult being here, but I did what everyone should do. Seek counseling as soon as you're done with your relationship. Break the addiction to the person because you're actually addicted to this individual. But before you can do that, you have to be honest with yourself and you have to admit that you are a victim, that you're being abused. If you don't admit to it, guess what? You're in denial. And you're going to return back to the environment because you're going to make excuses for this abuser. That's why I kept going back and forth. For six years, it was this game we had going. But as soon as I admitted to myself, he is abusive, he's running my life, and I'm nobody. I was walking like a dead soul. I didn't know me. And finally, when I decided to come out here, I did go for counseling, and I discovered this amazing woman. I'm like, you know what? I like her. I think I'll keep her. So the words of my boss in New York City resonated in me again. It just came back up. And the words were so strong. You are smart. You have a lot going for yourself. You don't deserve this. So I can say, when I went for counseling, it was kind of difficult because I had to hear a lot of things that I was doing that I felt, but I learned that as a child. You know, learn to tolerate, be forgiving, you know, make excuses. But I had to admit, no, that's not the way. What is it that you want? And that's, when they give you assignments, that's the toughest part. Because they want you to look deep in yourself and figure out, who are you? What are you looking for in this life? I was clueless, like what? Really? And every week that I would see this therapist, he'd dig deeper and deeper and deeper. And I always recommend, when you leave in a relationship, stay alone. You don't need to get involved with another man or woman. You need to heal. You're broken at this point. You admitted that you were in an abusive relationship, but now you have to admit that you're broken. And broken meaning you still don't know yourself, so the first person that comes to you, you're going to fall at your knees and be at their mercy. But when you know yourself, you have boundaries. Boundaries for me are very important. It's a way of you respecting yourself. And it's interesting because when you're at that level, the energy that you exude, people pick that up. People can feel when you're a confident person, right when you walk in through the door. And that's the predators in abusers. Abusers can see weak people. Someone they can take control over, because that's what an abuser is. They look for someone who's weaker than them, and they take over, because it builds them up. But when they see somebody walk in a room, they feel they're confident. That's why I have to constantly, I don't want to say convince them, but when they ask me, like, you don't look like you've ever been abused. Really? What does an abuser look like? So that's why my title of my book is The Masquerade is Over, because when you're in a relationship, you are wearing a mask. You're hiding who you really are to fit in with this other person that's creating a life for you. So I always say, if you recognize that you're in an abusive relationship, it actually alleviates you, because now it's sort of, you feel like, I'm getting closer to finding me because I'm accepting the truth. So once I accepted the truth, I started working on myself and saying, okay, what is it that I need? And in turn, my sons saw that in me. They saw a different woman. Like, wow, I remember you were always crying, and now you're so confident. You do things, you go places. Before, you wouldn't do anything. If Dad would say no, you would just cry. It's like, yeah. So I just find that we have to be conscious of what type of environment we are having in our own home. Because abusers are not, people are not born to be abusers. That's a learned behavior. And they see it in their home. I don't like admitting it, but I was a bully when I was in high school. And I put that in my book because I want everybody to know what a bully looks like. I even hate saying the word. But basically, because I was being beaten at home by my mom, I had a lot of anger in me. So I would go to school and take it out on poor Peter. It took me 30 years to finally find Peter and apologize and say, forgive me, Peter. And he's like, no, I understand the pressure that you were under. And what did I do? I found another female who was known in the school. Everybody respected her because she was the bully. She was a big bully. So I wanted that. I wanted that respect that everyone gave her, because I felt at home no one respected me. So when I got tag team with her, we would beat on boys. Till one day, we're beating on Peter, and my heart started to ache. I felt sorry for him. I said, what are we doing? This is crazy. So one day I go to her house, and her mother and her are having an altercation, and she literally punched her mother in her face. That drew the line for me. I said, you know, we might beat on other people, but for me, my mother's sacred. I don't care how many times she beats me up, I would never hit my mother. So I tried to break off the friendship. I said, I don't want to be a bully anymore, even though I didn't know that was the title. But when I broke off the friendship, she beat me up. So I bowed my head, walked away in grace. I said, you know what, it's okay, I deserved it, but I'll be a better person tomorrow. So this is what I'm saying. In today's world, we're seeing a lot of children bullying others, and we look at the victim, which we should, but we also need to look at this child's background. Why is this child taking out so much anger? We understand peer pressure. We understand that when they get to school, their environment caused them to act a certain way, but we still need to find out why they're acting out like that. That is a form of abuse. We just have a name called bully, and now it's even growing more within the kids in school. So I always talk to my children about that and let them know it's okay for you to step in and save somebody, because today people just walk away when they see someone either in altercation or arguing, and I can see why. They can have a weapon, it could be much more dangerous. But I'm very grateful that both my children, they're both married and they're not abusers. So I'm grateful for that. But I always recommend that if, your home, if you know it's a toxic environment, you have children, know that that's what you're teaching them. And they're going to walk away feeling this is okay, because my mother, who I worship, when we're children, we worship our parents. They don't do anything wrong. Our parents never lie, and our parents are our teachers. So if our parents can deal with it, why can't I? And this is what we, as the adult, need to realize. What is the message you're sending out to your children? What exactly are you showing them in your environment? That this is going to resonate with them, feeling it's okay. My father used to beat up my mother all the time. Unfortunately for me, when I met my ex-husband, he had the characteristics of my mother and my father, because my mother was abusive as well. So he had 2 in 1. So I felt lucky. Wow, he's like my mother and my father. 2 for the price of 1. So later on in life is where I started acting out where I'm not dealing with this, and my mother will push me back in. No, you can't leave him. You can't leave him. So if you're in an abusive environment, you have to realize that other people around you are also affected. We think just because it happens behind closed doors is our business. No, it's everyone's business. It's the community. It's your co-workers. You've heard about workplace violence, where the abuser goes to the workplace, kills the victim and bystanders. This is what I find when I go talk to businesses. I talk to the owners and explain to them, you need to learn to communicate with these people that are suffering and open the door for them. When I told my boss that the reason why I didn't show up for work for a week was because I was in intensive care. And he says, oh, what happened? You had surgery? I said, no, I tried to kill myself. And he took a step back, like, that's not the woman I know that works here. Why? And then I told him the truth. At home, I'm abused. My ex-husband is abusive. And what the words that came out of his mouth? What can I do for you? And I said, I was embarrassed. I'm like, really? You will help me? He says, yeah. Name it. What do you need? And I said to him, I want to move to another state, but I don't think I'll have the finances to survive. He says, don't worry about it. He went to the president of the company and said, we need to help her. So they gave me unemployment rights to collect. They gave me a bonus. They gave me my vacation, my sick time. I left with like $5,000 in my hand and a journey. And he said, stay in touch with us. Those are the type of people we need in our lives. Those are the people that should be more available to others. That if they know, ask, what can I do to help? So if you have a friend, a family, anyone that you know is being abused, we don't want you to try to save us. As a victim, we don't see that. We want you to be there for us. So offer to hear us cry or even assist us, but don't try to save us because we have to save ourselves. So I'm open to questions. If you want to hear a little bit, a lot of people are, once they read the book, they're like, you left us hanging, like, where are you today? What's your life like today? It's wonderful. Today is a life I wouldn't trade for anyone. I learned many lessons during those 11 years, and I find that today I'm able to share it with others. So I'm very grateful where I'm at today. I own my own business. I am a technical consultant for 15 years, and I basically love helping others understand who they are. This is not something you learn or someone teaches you. So going to the schools, I teach kids on how to dream. So I'm a dream coach as well. So when I'm saying I'm a dream coach, people's like, you're gonna analyze my dream? Oh, no, 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 not that type of dream. It's the dream that we all have within us, but someone else tries to steal it and we allow it. So the dreams I'm talking about is the purpose that we're here. Sometimes we don't realize we all have a purpose in this life. There's a reason. You might not see it because you're probably not looking into it because you're too busy being caring for someone else. Start caring for you. Once you live in your purpose and your passion, you find that life is much better. You're happy with yourself. I'm constantly kissing my hands. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope this was a good talk. Again, thank you for inviting me.
Is there anybody that has any questions? Well, thank you for speaking, and I'm sure she'll be available at the end if anybody has a question that they're maybe uncomfortable to raise their hand and ask. She did, in her speech, mention some things that got her help, like going to counseling. So I just wanted to quickly remind people that our agency does offer a hotline, which for the people here, we have the hotline numbers on the palm cards, but for anyone watching at home, you can call at 860-763-4542, and it's a 24/7 confidential hotline. We do have counseling services available in our office for anybody that wanted to come in and talk, and we have an emergency shelter for people that do need help getting away. But also, we provide services for people that want to leave or stay, which is an important part because we do understand that it is very hard leaving and that people need a plan in place. So we're willing to work with that. We don't try and force anyone to leave. We help either way. And we do serve both male and female victims from any sort of background that you could come from. So our next speaker to come up is Gary Roy, and he's going to talk more about a male victim side of it, since a lot of people might not be familiar with that. So if you want to come up and talk.
Thank you.
Okay.
It's okay if I stand by the podium. This is the first time I've ever talked in a group, or actually told many people that I was a victim of domestic violence. I've never had the opportunity before. For me, it happened about 13 years ago, my first marriage. I was married for almost 18 years at the time. And looking back at it, I didn't have that ran in my family, so it was really different for me. And my parents are still married today, 59 years. And whenever me and my brother were little, we didn't have this. We didn't have any idea about domestic violence because it wasn't anything we saw. So I guess I didn't see what the signs were. And a lot of the signs, I guess, for me was a lot of verbal abuse. Basically, you know, not going to mount up to anything, you got a no good for nothing job, you don't make enough money, why don't you do this right, you know, all this kind of stuff for years and years and years. And it came to a point that I started talking to her about divorce because, you know, it just wasn't going to work out, and it wasn't a comfortable marriage, or it wasn't a comfortable relationship to be in. So I moved out actually before any of the violence started. And she came to visit me one day and started an argument about something. And when I turned my back to walk away, you know, that's when the violence started. She hit me, and I just walked away. And unfortunately, it did happen in front of one of my children. And he's 20 now, and I don't see any signs of it in him. He hasn't had that many relationships. If anything, he's more needy in a relationship, the ones he has. But my oldest son, he's 25. I see a little bit maybe in him today. He's very quick-tempered, very quick to argue, very quick to take control over his girlfriend and kind of, you know, cut her off on conversations and stuff. So it's something that I'm keeping an eye on, you know, and if I have to step in on that or, you know, say something, I probably will. But right now it hasn't got to that point. But looking back at it, I'm very glad I came today because, like I said, I've never been in a group that have talked about their experiences before, and I learned quite a bit when you were talking. I was looking back and I'm thinking, there was signs there, but I didn't know what they were at the time. My ex-wife's father, her parents were divorced, and he was a very demanding person. When I first met the family, he was getting remarried for a second time, and I remember that he was a person that if he had to try to take a nap in the daytime, he would kick everybody out of the house. If he wanted dinner on a table, it had to be on a table. And these are signs that I say today is something that could lead to it. It's a very demanding person. It had to be, everything had to be his way. He didn't want any arguments about it, and that was it. And looking back at it, I didn't realize it back then, but I do realize it today, that there was a sign there. And I guess I just wasn't aware of it. Maybe if I was, maybe I wouldn't have got married the first time if that was a sign of something maybe to come. But it's tough. It's tough for me to talk about it because it's, I haven't told a lot of people I know that I was a victim of domestic violence. You know, we just said that the marriage wasn't going good and, you know, we got divorced. And of course, the disappointing thing is, you did talk about your children in custody. The disappointing thing for me was that I never could get custody of my children. I could only get visitation, which, you know, you can't do much about it when you go to court. So you just move forward and you make the best of the times you have with them. And, you know, I noticed that there was 2 different environments. Usually when I got them for a weekend, I noticed that they were a little quick-tempered and not really wanting to go and do many things. I used to like to take them for bike rides or walks or go to a fair or go to a store or go out and do something with them. And I noticed that usually the first day I had them, they didn't want to do nothing. They didn't want to talk, they didn't want to do nothing. Usually by the second or third day, they opened up and they started enjoying themselves. And it went that way for many years. And I notice now that they're both grown and stuff. Anytime I get together with them now, they seem like they're very open and easier to talk to and stuff like that. So that was a concern. And I didn't have any counseling, unfortunately. I didn't know what route to go at the time. I didn't feel comfortable going into a counselor, a woman counselor at the time, because I was still trying to grasp hold of being a victim of domestic violence. That I never thought it would ever happen because there was no history there was no signs, there was nothing in the family or nothing. So, you know, to me it was totally different. And so I looked a little bit for counseling, but I didn't find a man to go talk to or classes to go to talk to, so I just forgot about it. And luckily, I still have my parents with me, and they were very good support. My parents, my brother, my sister-in-law, they really helped me out a lot. And even probably I'd say less than a year after this happened, I did start dating somebody new, but it wasn't a very, I wouldn't say committed relationship right away, because I was still going through my divorce at the time. And what it was she actually had a background of domestic violence in her family. And I didn't know that until months after I started dating her. And we are married now. It's been 3 years, but it took me 10 years to get married. I couldn't commit to it. I didn't feel as I could. I didn't feel comfortable. And it took me 10 years, which was a long time, and she stuck around. She'd ask me all the time, "You think we're going to get married someday?" And I said, first met her, I said, "I'd never get married again." You know, it was like poison. Then after a while, I realized it wasn't the marriage that was my problem. It was the relationship I was in that was my problem. And this relationship was nice. It wasn't built on money. We never, in fact, to this day, we've been together now for 13 years almost, and we still never discuss money that we have. We have our own separate accounts. She wants to buy some, she buys some, I buy some, I buy some. It comes out of my money, it comes out of her money. It's a very relaxing relationship. It's not based on money like the first one was basically based on how much money could I make, how much could we buy. And at that time, we were buying new cars, new house, campers. I mean, we were buying all types of stuff. And looking back, it's like, you know, I worked a lot for things that kind of my ex enjoyed. But I didn't enjoy it because I couldn't go camping much because I had to go to work every day. And she wasn't working, so during the summer, she could go live up to campground. And then I'd have to go to work and then go to campground and go to house. And so it wasn't really a relationship that was 50-50. And I think that put a strain on it too. But this whole relationship now that I'm in, this marriage, is it's something built on good trust, and you know, it's a whole different thing for me. It's something that you don't think you're ever going to get into again, but you got to look back and, you know, the marriage wasn't my problem. It was the relationship was a little different than just the marriage alone. By saying marriage, and actually, even to take a step farther and try to, I guess, heal myself in a way, I became a justice of the peace, and now I perform marriages for people. So that took many years to think, what can I do to really feel more comfortable? Before I even got married, I started performing marriages, and I started realizing it's not that bad. You know, the marriage isn't that bad. And I see these people who are getting married, and I'm performing something that's starting them off on a good relationship, a good part to their life, and then so it was about time we did get married, and I felt very comfortable with it this time around. But like I said, I never had the opportunity to talk before. So tonight, for me, it's a big step. I wish it's a step I could have taken 10 years ago, but I just, you know, maybe at the time, like I said, I looked a little, and I think what else I stopped looking is because I had family and friends to support me. And I think I just kind of stopped looking for that. But now I've been thinking about now, my kids are older, and I saw the ad, and I said, I want to try to at least, you know, say that there's, you know, there's men out there who are victims too, and it's basically the same thing. I mean, it's just that you don't, for a man, I took it for the verbal abuse for many, you know, I was married for almost 18 years, and I didn't leave until we were married about 16 years. So I took it for almost, at least 14 years out of that marriage. And it was something, like I said, I never had that before, so I didn't know. I guess the more verbal abuse I got, the more I worked to try to bring home more money to try to make things easier at home. And it did make a difference. So I was trying to figure out my way out of the abuse. I'd work 10, 12, 14 hours a day if I could. And 6, 7 days a week, I didn't care. I wasn't home to get the abuse. I was making more money, and it would keep her happy for a while. So I wouldn't get the abuse so much. So I guess that was my way of trying to solve a problem, which didn't solve it. It just prolonged it for a while. Yeah, that's, like I said, that's about all. I haven't done this before, so I don't know really what to talk about, just kind of my experience. But I am grateful to give me the opportunity to come here tonight and talk. And if anybody has any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them if I can.
Is there anyone that has any questions? Okay. Well, again, if anybody wants to ask at the end, I'm sure you would be available. Wouldn't mind talking. So we got to hear two different sides of domestic violence tonight in a few different ways, some with the generational, some it being new. Some of the important things I think for people to take away from this that you can look for at when in your relationships or with friends you have, being mindful of the different types of abuse. We recognize it as the 4 types, the verbal, emotional, sexual, and physical abuse. And it's important to know that not all relationships are physical abuse. That's what most people know. But as the speaker showed you tonight, the verbal and emotional abuse can take a lot of toll on the person too. And also in the last one, learning a little bit about the financial abuse. The people constantly putting you in charge of everything, making you feel like you have to bring home a certain amount, that you have to have a job, or on the other side that you can't have a job to be in a relationship with them. Being on the lookout for those types of controlling aspects of a relationship. And I think one of the important things that was said is just realizing that if you're not comfortable with it, that maybe it's something to look into and not get help. Because even if you don't know domestic violence for what it is, relationships should be comfortable and relaxed, as our last speaker was saying. So that's something that if you can't take anything else away, to at least bring that to your relationships to make sure they're healthy. Well, thank you everyone for coming out tonight. If you have any questions, you can stick around to ask. Again, we do have lots of delicious homemade refreshments and store-bought refreshments in the back, and plenty of information and books available. Have a good night.